All right, let's welcome Gary Cohen, who proclaimed back in August that, quote, the polar bear was on his own private iceberg when he set the new franchise home run record. And, Gary, that iceberg is now floating towards Baltimore. So I want to follow up on what Keith had to say there. Touch and go with Pete last offseason. Did you expect it was going to come to this conclusion today?
Well, it's not often that polar bears and blue crabs play in the same waters, but apparently that's going to be the situation in Baltimore. Look, I totally agree with Keith. This can't be a shock to anybody who saw how the Mets handled Pete's free agency last year. They had no intention of giving him a 5-year deal going into his age 30 season, and they certainly weren't going to give him one going into his age 31 season. This actually reminds me very much of the way the Mets parted with Jacob deGrom, that they would have been interested in bringing Jake back on a shorter deal, as they would have been with Alonso. But once it appeared that teams were going to go 4 or 5 years with Pete, it just was not in their game plan. And you can fault them for that and say that they've read Pete's value wrong, but that clearly was their intention all along, to not go deep into Alonso's 30s with a contract. Now, obviously, if you're a Mets fan, this is a really hard day. It's always hard saying goodbye to the players that you've been rooting for. And when you strip away Nimmo and Diaz and Alonso in a short period of time, that's a gut punch. And now we have to see how David Stearns decides to rebuild this team. But again, I can't be shocked that the Mets would not go to the terms that the Orioles did with Alonso. That was never going to be in the cards.
I get that. But as Joel Sherman said today, he said the Mets never even made a bid for Alonso. Are you surprised at that, Gary?
Well, again, once they saw that the market was going to teams offering him 4 and 5 years, I don't think that was on their radar. It was clear last winter that the Mets did not value Alonso to that extent, and certainly did not feel as though a player like him would age well into his mid-30s. Now, they could be totally wrong about that. Pete could end up having age 34 and 35 seasons of the caliber that he's had, and in that case, the Mets end up looking bad. We'll see. That's a matter of how David Stearns values players given their age and their characteristics. And he's going to be proven right, or he's going to be proven wrong. But I know it's really hard for Met fans to accept that the core of this team has been broken up. Honestly, the shocker to me was Diaz. I could not believe that the Mets would let Diaz walk away. They had put themselves in the position to have a superb back end of the bullpen with Williams and Diaz, and the fact that they allowed Edwin to walk away without overwhelming him really surprised me.
Gary, you mentioned that this is a gut punch for most Mets fans who have just been dying for somebody from start to finish to start and end their career with the Mets. What is Pete Alonso's legacy, you think, with the Mets?
Well, he's the greatest home run hitter in Mets history, not just in terms of the number of home runs he hit, but in terms of the threat that he posed. The only person close to that was Darryl Strawberry. Dave Kingman to a lesser extent, but he was a different kind of player. But, Pete was a joy. He had a great love for the Mets, and he had a great love for the game, and he played every day. And he was awkward in the field, but he was a threat every time he went to the plate. And it is the greatest of ironies that the home run, the biggest one that he hit as a Met, was off a player who now will be an important piece to the Mets going forward in Devin Williams.
Yes, indeed. What about replacements? Have you had a chance to think about it, Garen, how they should replace Pete Alonso?
Well, to me, it's obvious that the Mets have to make a big offensive splash, much bigger than you would have expected going into the offseason. They traded Nimmo because that shored up the defense a little bit and took them away from 2 years of financial obligation that they would have had, 5 years for Nimmo, 3 for Semien. So that made some degree of sense. But the Mets have a lot of good position players coming up through the farm system, and part of this is to provide a ramp for Carson Bench and Jet Williams and A.J. Ewing. But those guys are not all going to be playing on opening day in 2026. I really think that the Mets have got to be in the market for Kyle Tucker, and I would not understand why they wouldn't be. He's ironically from the same high school as Pete Alonso, and he's 2 years younger and a tremendous all-around hitter. He's not a 40 home run hitter, but he's a 25 to 30 home run hitter and a much better average hitter. Yes, he's left-handed, and the Mets need some right-handed bats, and they're going to have to figure that part out. I've heard the idea of signing Paul Goldschmidt and platooning him with Jeff McNeil at first base. That could be part of the solution. I don't know. But I think that Tucker has to be right at the top of their list. And it'll be hard to understand with all the dollars the Mets now have available if that wasn't the case.
All right, Gary, we thank you for your thoughts. Happy holidays to you and Lynn and the family. Good to see you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Keith.
All right, just getting going here, Mets Hot Stove. When we come back,